Hello, I'm Keith R.A. DeCandido, and welcome to the latest installment of KRAD COVID readings, which is me reading my short fiction to entertain you during our long coronavirus nightmare. Back in 2011, I was invited to contribute to More Tales of Zorro, the sequel anthology to Tales of Zorro. Richard Dean Starr, the editor, wanted to get a bunch of people to do stories about Zorro. Everybody who was in More Tales of Zorro are all authors who were not in Tales of Zorro. He wanted a whole new lineup of people, and he got rather a good bunch of people. We got Cage Baker, Matthew Baugh, Johnny D. Boggs, Henry Darrow, Carol Nelson Douglas, Win Scott Eckert, Jennifer Fallon, Alan Dean Foster, Craig Shaw Gardner, Joe Gentili, Joe R. Lansdale, John Peel, Steve Resnick-Tim, and Timothy Zahn, as well as Richard Dean Starr himself, the editor of the book. These are all stories about Zorro from throughout his history. My story in particular, what I had pitched to them was I wanted to do a story that was about Capitan Monstario. He's Zorro's main bad guy throughout most of his stories. And that was one thing I realized reading all the various works of Zorro fiction over the years, was we never really found out why Monstario was the way he was. He was, cranky. He was always after Zorro. He was always trying to get more money. He was kind of, a greedhead. He also really had no use for the church at all, which is unusual for an officer of from an officer of Spain, considering how important the Catholic Church was. But so I was curious what made him tick, and this story in particular, I pitched the basic idea, but I hadn't worked out all the details of the story. One day I'm riding home on the express bus, and one line from the story, I'll tell you which one when we get to the end of it, popped into my head. And then shortly after that, this entire story core dumped into my brain. I'm jumping in my seat, like waiting to get home. I get home, I run home when I get off the bus, briefly acknowledge the existence of my girlfriend at the time, and then sit down at the computer, and this story jumps out and writes itself down. It was like 3 hours, and I wrote this entire 6,000 word story all at once. Never before or since has any story possessed me the way this one did. I'm extremely pleased with it, and without further ado, here is Letter from Guadalajara, the story of Capitan Monstario, by Keith R.A. DeCandido. Capitan Enrique Sanchez Monstario loathed spring. One of the few things he liked about his assignment to this appalling desert wasteland of Alta California was that, he imagined, he could escape his twin weaknesses to damp and pollen. However, he did not reckon with the settlement's wealthier denizens, of which he was one of course, having large gardens filled with flowers, both local and transplanted from the motherland. And so, for 1 week out of every year, generally around late March, the flowers would bloom, the landscape would grow pretty, and Monstario was not permitted to breathe. The pounding in his head was only made worse by the arrival of his second, Sergeant Garcia. Capitan? What is it, Sergeant? Well, you see, Capitan, the mail has arrived. Glancing out the window of his well-appointed office, Monstario saw that the sun was at its zenith. It is midday, Sergeant. Yes, sir. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the mail always arrives at midday on Wednesday, yes? Well, yes, sir, but Monstario let out a long sigh that quickly modulated into a snarl. Sergeant, at present I feel as if my skull has been filled end to end with gunpowder, waiting only a lit fuse that it might explode. The mere act of inhalation causes me misery on a scale that would make a leper weep. You would therefore be well to explain, and quickly, why you have gone to the effort of carrying your corpulent form all the way to my office simply to inform me that an event that happens at this time every week has, in fact, happened at this time this week. Garcia shifted his great weight back and forth from one foot to the other, an action that made the rotund officer look as if he'd teeter over at any minute. Well, you see, sir, there are 2 letters here for you that I thought required your immediate attention. One is from General de la Nueva in Santa Barbara. Another verbal skewering of the sergeant died on Monastario's lips. Delanueva was the one whose signature adorned the bottom of the orders that sent him to the Pueblo of Los Angeles almost a year ago, and was also the recipient of the letter Monastario had sent to Santa Barbara a fortnight ago. "And the other?" he asked, rubbing his temples in a failed attempt to get them to stop throbbing. There is no name, but it comes from Guadalajara." Monastario's hands dropped to his desk, and he looked up at Garcia. "Guadalajara?" He shook his head, an action he immediately regretted, and asked, "Sergeant, is the J in the city name adorned with an unusual flourish, and is it dotted with an X?" As Monastario watched, Garcia's face took on several expressions at once, no doubt born of the confusion engendered both by the Capitan's asking of the question and of the fact that the answer was apparently yes. "How did you know, Capitan?" Returning to the rubbing of his temples, Monastario said, "Read me the letter from the general." "Sir?" "The request was clear, was it not, Sergeant?" "Well, yes, sir, but you haven't lost your facility for Spanish in the past minute, have you?" "Well, no, sir, but then read the letter, if you please." "But, sir, I am not fit to see such documents." Monastario smiled bitterly. "Please, Sergeant, do not sell yourself short. The list of things for which you are not fit is a lengthy one, and one I would be happy to enumerate in detail were I in better health. In fact, I would grant being a sergeant primacy on that list. Nonetheless, I am currently suffering from pain in my head that would stop a bull in its tracks, and attempting to decipher the General's Secretary's hand will only exacerbate an already miserable situation. I therefore, as your commanding officer, hereby give you leave to read the General's a letter aloud to me." Garcia cleared his throat several times before finally saying, "Yes, sir, of course, sir." Fumbling with the envelope with his pudgy fingers, to the point where Monastario was tempted to loan the sergeant his own dagger, and only didn't, for fear of Garcia slicing open a vein and making a mess in his office, Garcia finally managed to tear it open and liberate the one-page item inside. Unfolding the paper, he opened his mouth to speak, but Monastario, recalling Garcia's literal-minded tendencies, quickly said, "Skip to the important part, please, Sergeant." Hesitating, Garcia said, "So you don't wish me to inquire as to your health?" Monastario snorted, an action that felt as if it expanded his nose to the size of Garcia. He spit some phlegm into the spittoon next to his desk, and then said, "Correct." Again, Garcia cleared his throat. "Regarding your request for a transfer, Capitan, I'm afraid that approving the request is, of course, out of the question, and I am surprised that you would even have the effrontery to ask." This time, Garcia's clearing of the throat had nothing to do with preparing to speak. Is the Capitan sure that—" "Go on," Monastario said through clenched teeth. "But, sir, I don't think it's right that I should see this," slamming a fist on his wooden desk. Monastario bellowed, "Sergeant, the only consideration I have ever given to what you think is to comment on the extreme rarity of such an event. Go on." "Yes, sir. You were told the conditions under which your term at your current post would end. Those conditions have yet to be met. Until they are, you shall remain assigned there. The subject is closed." Then he wishes you well and signs it and whatnot. "I see." Monastario leaned back in his chair. Garcia stammered, I'm sorry, sir." "Well, Sergeant, I must thank you. After all, my life is a quagmire of misery, and my one hope has just been dashed. But it's all right, because Sergeant Demetrio Lopez Garcia has pity for me. That makes everything better." "Sir," cutting off yet another pathetic exhortation, the Capitan said, "Set that and the other letter on my desk." Yes, sir." As Garcia moved to do so, Monastario added, "Unless King Ferdinand himself enters the compound, I am not to be disturbed for the rest of the day." "Yes, sir. What about Zorro?" What about Zorro? What if he enters the compound? Should I disturb you there? Giving Garcia as foul-tempered a look as he could manage, which was quite considerable at present, Monstario said, not then either. If Zorro comes today, he can have me. After Garcia's hasty departure, Monstario slowly rose to his feet. His reaction to the flowers made him somewhat dizzy, so he had to steady his stance for a moment before continuing to the ornate wooden cabinet. Like virtually everything in this office, it was scarred with the triple sword-slash pattern in the shape of a letter Z that the fox tended to leave behind before departing a room. There were so many of those scars among the furnishings that Monstario barely noticed them anymore. Fishing a key from his uniform pocket, he unlocked the small door on the cabinet's bottom leftmost corner, swinging it open to reveal a cubbyhole that could hold far more than its actual contents. A thick-bottomed, clear bottle of an equally clear liquid that sat alone in the center of the cubbyhole. He had yet to crack open the tequila since he brought it here from his last post. But he suspected he would need to imbibe some, if not all, of it before he worked up the strength to actually read the second letter. Monstario took a glass from the sideboard where he kept the drinks he was willing to share with the superior officers, Don's high-ranking priests and others of equal or greater station who visited his office, and then poured himself some of the Mexican liquor. The memories prompted by the lovely, intense odor that emanated from the bottle were almost palpable. You're 8 years old, riding with your older brothers Pablo and Juan, your older sister Maria Esperanza, and mother and father to a dinner party. The carriage passes a building that looks horribly damaged. Ever inquisitive, you ask, "What happened to that building?" Pablo looks down on you, as Pablo always does to everyone except for father. "It burned, stupid." Out of habit more than rebuke, mother says, "Pablo, don't speak to Kike that way." Father adds, "That house belonged to the Delgados. Both the owner and his 2 sons died in the fire, which is why it still stands empty a year later." "I don't understand," you say honestly. "Of course you don't," Pablo says. "Shut up, Pablo," Juan says. "You shut up, Juancito." You ignore your brothers and look out the carriage window again. You see children wearing too little clothing and covered in too much dirt. They seem to be searching for something in the building. Why are those children there? Father sighs. Who knows why the peasants do as they do? Perhaps they think they can find money there. Peasants don't have money? No, stupid, Pablo says expectantly. God is very careful, Kike, Father says before anyone can castigate Pablo again. He only gives money to those who are able to handle it. People who are born poor are born such because God knows that money would cause them evil. I see, you say, even though you really don't. You sneak out to the building a week later. It's easy. The house staff is too busy trying to break up Pablo and Juan's endless quarreling and to cater to Maria Esperanza's every whim, so no one ever pays attention to the littlest one. When you arrive, there are 3 young boys there again. You're not sure if they're the same ones, but they look similar enough. They're wearing clothes that are in just dreadful condition. The hair is a mess, they're filthy, some of them have no shoes, and they're all so skinny. You're appalled. Who are you? One of them asks. My name's Enrique. What's yours? Another one cuts off the first one. We're not supposed to talk to you. This confuses you. Why not? You're one of the upper classes. If we talk to you, we'll get whipped. That's crazy, you say, meaning it. Well, why are you in this building? You could get hurt. If we're lucky, we'll find some money or something we can sell. If we do, then we can eat today. You gulp in shock at that. Eat today? Your 8 years have never contained a day that didn't have at least 3 meals. All you need is money in order to eat? Yes, the boy says slowly. Reaching into your pocket, you pull out some coins. You're not sure how much. Sums were never your strong suit. But it's an amount you can spare easily. The boy's eyes all go wide. You realize that they've never seen this much money before. Go ahead, you say as they hesitate. Take it. You need it a lot more than I do. Eventually, they grab hungrily at the coins. You make regular trips to the house after that. Each time you go, you bring more coins. Each time you go, there are more boys. You can't bring enough coins for everyone. They start to get angry. One time you go, and you've only been able to scrape together a small pile of coins, but there are a dozen boys at the burned-out building, and one of them is bigger than Father. The big one says, "That all you got?" I'm sorry, I just... Turning to another boy, the big one says, "You said he had money." "He does. He's probably just holding out on us." Filthy traitor leading us on. "Yeah, like all the other rich people, trying to make us look stupid." Before you know what's happening, the boys are all yelling at you, and the big one starts to hit you. In 8 years of life, your only direct experience with violence has been the occasional spanking as a baby. Until now. The boy hits you, and there's blood, and the pain is just awful. Father is yelling at you while the doctor treats your injuries. "What were you thinking, Kike? Did I not tell you that God wishes the peasants to be poor? If he wished otherwise, he would have made them be born of our class." I'm sorry, Father." "Your heart was in the right place, Kike, but you cannot simply give to the poor. If you do, they will only ask for more until you have nothing, and then they turn on you like the beasts they are." "Wasn't all of them?" you insist. After all, the first 3 boys were nice. It was just the one. After the doctor is done, Father takes you into the city to find the boy in question. It's not as difficult as you think at first, since this boy is so much bigger than the others, and he makes no effort to hide himself. When the soldier sees him at Father's orders, the large boy does not deny what he has done. "He provoked me!" the large boy insists. "I was just defending myself!" You watch the boy get whipped 50 times. See him break down into tears by the 10th lash, and you enjoy watching him suffer as you did. You revel in the melodious laugh of Marisela de los Santos as you walk through her family's beautiful garden in Guadalajara. You're even willing to suffer the stuffing up of your nose that results from being among the blooming flowers, only so you can hear that laugh again. "I must return to the house," she says, clutching the parasol that shields her porcelain features from the violence of the sun. "Thank you, Kike, for the company." You kiss her white-gloved hand the way your tutors instructed you, and then watch her navigate slowly through the garden back to the house, casting several glances behind her. "That's a fine form you cut in that uniform, Kike," comes a voice from behind you. You wince as you turn to face Pablo. At 17, only 2 people call you Kike. For Marisela, it's an endearment. From Pablo, it's an unsubtle reminder of which of you is Father's eldest, and therefore his heir. As the 3rd son, your only option is the military, where you are placed in the officer corps immediately. Your training will begin soon, but you have already been issued the uniform of a cadet. The compliment on how you look in the uniform is a rare one from Pablo, so you thank him. Of course, such an occasion often precedes a favor. "I was wondering, Kike, what you think of Señorita de los Santos as a wife?" Your eyes go wide. Your stomach starts to churn like mad. There is nothing that would please you more than to make this angel yours. But before you can reply, Pablo continues. "I can think of no one better suited to be my bride. Can you?" And then you realize. This is why the Monastarios and the De Los Santoses have spent so much time together of late. The intention was to merge the family's fortunes through a union between Father's oldest son and the De Los Santoses' only daughter. Marisela will never be yours. Padre Esteban has been very generous in allowing you to see Maricela in the days leading up to the wedding. It is difficult to arrange meetings. She is awash in preparations for marriage to Pablo, and you are enmeshed in officer training. But with the help of the priest, you are able to steal precious time with your lady love. You try to thank the priest, but he insists on no payment. It is enough, he says, to see two young people who adore each other be allowed to express themselves as God intends. But one day, you arrive to find not only Esteban, but Pablo and father and Governor-Intendant Roque Abarca himself. You make a half-hearted attempt to explain your presence at the mission, knowing that the truth will result in punishment of some sort, possibly death. Somehow they believe you when you say you have a private message for the priest from a friend of his stationed at the training camp, and you are able to steal a moment. What is happening? You ask. What do you mean? Esteban asks. Why did you not get word to me that I could not visit Maricela? Esteban draws himself up to his full height. My good man, are you insinuating that I would allow you to see Senorita de los Santos, a woman affianced to your brother, in secret? I am a man of God, sir! Glancing behind to make sure that no one comes running at the sound of Esteban's bellowing, you whisper, Please! You said we should be allowed. The only thing I will allow, sir, is your departure from my church, and never set foot in here again, if you know what is good for you. As you leave, you hear the priest apologize to the governor and your family, and then he asks the governor what precisely the arrangements for the delivery of the gold will be. Your career proceeds at the pace of a snail. Padre Esteban is Bishop Esteban now, and he has the governor's ear. So does Pablo, who inherited father's lands and titles upon the latter's death, and proceeded to invest and increase his power, soon becoming Don Pablo Sanchez Monasterio. You don't know for sure, of course, but so many promotions are blocked. So many opportunities are given to lesser officers, lesser in skill and lesser in breeding, that you cannot believe that there isn't an invisible hand or two guiding your misery. Especially since you are the consummate soldier. Every order you are given, you follow to the letter. Every commander you are assigned to, you pledge your loyalty to, and that loyalty is rewarded every time. Every rule, every regulation, you follow religiously. Even such comparatively inconsequential minutiae as grooming. Your commendations pile up to as great a height as your turned down promotions. Don Pablo never speaks to you again after that day at the church, leading you to believe that Esteban's outraged words did carry to the front as you feared. Only one thing keeps you sane. Once a year, in springtime, when the flowers bloom, you receive a letter from the former De Los Santos estate, now one of the many Monasterio holdings, in Guadalajara. The first year, the letter comes with a box that contains a bottle of liquor from a city called Tequila, not far from Guadalajara. You swear not to drink it until the proper occasion presents itself. And then you are invited to share a meal with General de la Nueva. We have a problem in Los Angeles, he explains, while devouring a bloody steak with his gloved hands. An outlaw who continues to defy the king's law. He styles himself the Fox. You are stunned. Zorro? I thought him a legend, like the Weeping Woman or the Seven Cities of Gold. Rest assured, Capitan, he is real. And your job is to stop him. He has already brought disgrace to both the military and the governor's office. You will be made military commander of the Pueblo and its outlying territories, but those duties will be secondary to this. Zorro must be stopped at all costs by any means. I will report immediately, you say without hesitation. From what you've heard, Zorro is a blight upon Spain, a creature who defies the rightful dictates of law, both God's and man's. True, you've not believed those stories, but neither do you doubt the general's word. Besides, if you are the one to stop the Fox, perhaps that would finally allow you to come out from under the thumb of your brother and the bishop. And so you proceed, at first light, to your new post. Wake up! Letting out a gasp, Monstario lifted his head from the desk. Instinctively, his hand reached for his sword. Even as his hand closed over the hilt, the weapon still lodged in the scabbard attached to his belt, the Capitan realized that Zorro was in his office, and that he had been asleep for some time. He quickly looked about the office. It had grown dark. Garcia had disobeyed orders long enough to have the lanterns in the office lit, which Monstario was willing to forgive, and most of the tequila was gone. His headache was even worse, and drool was dripping from the corner of his mouth. "Whatever it is you want, Zorro," Monstario said blearily as he wiped the drool with the back of his glove. "May we please proceed to the part where you make me look a fool, deface my furniture, and leave via the window." "Why have you done this, Capitan?" "Done what?" "Do not pretend ignorance!" the outlaw shouted. "I am not pretending, sir!" Monstario shouted right back. "I have been alone in this room since midday, as Garcia is my witness." He knew that, for reasons passing understanding, Zorro trusted the fat sergeant's word, even though the fox tormented Garcia as much as he did anyone and everyone in authority. Zorro seemed to consider this. "Perhaps you are innocent." "Ha!" Monstario rose unsteadily to his feet, resting his hands on the surface of his desk to hold himself upright. "What do you know of innocent and guilty, Zorro? Those are terms of law, and you have placed yourself outside it." "Perhaps, but I do so for the greater good." "Whose greater good, I wonder?" "Do you know that a military commander of a settlement of this size usually has 3 times the manpower? I do not, because of you. My superiors view it as a waste of resources. And yet, in addition to having to clean up your messes, I must also perform my usual duties." "Such as making yourself richer?" Monstario did not take the bait. "Such as preserving the security of the pueblo. Such as maintaining order in the settlement. It was my soldiers who fixed the bridge that was destroyed in those rains last month. And the Dons who paid for it." Now Monstario did take the bait. "Your sarcasm notwithstanding, sir, our superiors, in fact, do encourage us to make ourselves richer. However, they do discourage us from using our own capital to finance endeavors of the state. If the military's own funds cannot provide, as indeed they could not last month, then we look outside. That is what the Dons are for." Finally, the Capitan felt confident enough in his stability, if not his sobriety, to stand upright without help from the desk. "But then," he continued, "you know that. You are one of the Dons. Oh," he added quickly, "I do not know which, but it was clear from the first weeks after I arrived that you were one of them." "Why do you say that?" "I've seen you smile, sir," Monstario said. "Only a man of breeding and station has such fine teeth. For that matter, only a well-fed man could do what you do skillfully, and your well-cared-for mustache is one that is primarily seen on the upper classes. Also, the only part of you I can see is your smirk, and only a Don smirks quite like that." The Capitan did not add that Don Pablo had the same smirk. "You are perhaps smarter than I gave you credit for, Capitan," Zorro said with a small bow. "I could hardly be stupider than you give me credit for, sir." "Then I must ask you, Capitan, how can you perform the acts you perform? Surely a man of your intelligence knows that what you do is wrong." Monstario shook his head. "What I do is wrong. By whose standard? See, I am a soldier. My duty is to follow the orders of my superiors. If I shirk that duty, then what I do is wrong. Even if those orders are immoral." Now Monstario leaned his head back and roared with laughter. Loud enough that it made his own headache worse, but he no longer cared. "I amuse you, Capitan?" "Oh, very much so, actually," he said, getting himself under control. "Do you know what my primary orders are at this post? To stop you. All other matters are secondary, including protection of and security for the settlement. The only right thing for me to do, sir, is to stop you by any means necessary. You see, Zorro, while anonymity frees you, my rank shackles me. I can do naught but follow the orders I am given, for if I do not, my fate will be well and truly sealed." No matter how many peasants or men of God get in the way of you following those instructions? Again, Monstario laughed, but it was a bitter one. Believe me when I tell you that the welfare of vermin is not listed among my responsibilities. The peasants are human beings, created in God's image like everyone else, and they do not deserve... Monstario interrupted. More proof that you are a Don, sir. Only a Don could be that ignorant. I know the peasants quite well, Zorro, and they deserve neither consideration nor compassion, and I'd sooner give it to them than any so-called men of God. It is ironic, Zorro said, shaking his head with apparent pity, an emotion that Monstario no more wanted from the fox than he did from Garcia. What is? Zorro stared at Monstario. The Capitan supposed it might have been an intense stare, but the mask that covered the top of the fox's face served its purpose well, reducing the effectiveness of the outlaw's glare. But then, if Monstario could see Zorro's eyes clearly enough for the glower to have full effect, he would also see enough of his eyes to perhaps identify him. You see, Capitan, Zorro said, I had retired. Capitan Ramon was dead. The governor had returned to Spain in disgrace. Zorro was no more. I only came back out of retirement because of your arrival. A multitude of emotions washed over Monstario, breaking on his mind like so many waves. Anger, laughter, amazement, bitterness. General de la Nueva mentioned nothing about Zorro retiring, but then how does anyone know for sure that a mysterious, anonymous figure who only appears for brief intervals is gone? I cannot leave until you are gone, yet my being gone is the only way to be rid of you. Monstario snatched the thick glass that had the last sip of tequila. God, it seems, has a greater sense of humor than even I imagined. He slugged down the last of his drink. It burned as it traveled down his throat. Enough. I would like to go to bed. Kindly leave. The Capitan could see one of Zorro's eyebrows rise from the motion on his mask. You will not try to thwart me? Not today. Consider it a gift. What is the occasion, Capitan? An anniversary. Monstario sat back down in his chair. Holding up his rapier, Zorro said, Very well, Capitan. Until next time. Zorro cast about the office for several moments. Monstario was used to this. He was looking for something to leave his mark upon. But after a moment, he looked back at the Capitan. Then he put the rapier's tip to his own forehead in salute. Good night. And for the first time since his arrival in this sand-choked hole of hell, Monstario saw the fox leave his office without defacing a single item. Once Zorro was gone, Monstario looked down at his desk. The letter from the general had been dampened by Monastario's drool, causing a blot upon General de la Nueva's signature. Monstario found that he could live with that. He took hold of the envelope and held it to his nose, wondering what he would smell were his nose functioning properly. As he did so, he imagined that he heard a melodious laugh. Reaching for his belt, he unholstered the dagger he'd been issued. Gently, he sliced open the envelope and took the letter out from inside it. As always, it was 3 pages long. Maricela never wrote more or less than that. As always, it began with the words, Dear Quique. And for 1 hour, on one day in the spring, Capitan Enrique Sanchez Monstario knew joy. That's the story. The phrase that popped into my head on the bus was the line about how, you see, Zorro, while anonymity frees you, my rank shackles me. And the whole story pretty much grew out from that. More Tales of Zorro is published by Moonstone Books. You should be able to find it online, probably. Came out in 2011, so maybe harder to find now, but you never know. Give it a shot. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel that this is part of. There's lots and lots more readings of lots and lots of my short fiction. Check out my website at DeCandido.net, my blog at DeCandido.wordpress.com, and please, if you could support me on Patreon, that would be wonderful. It's patreon.com/krad. And there's also currently a Kickstarter running for To Hell and Regroup, which is a novel I'm doing with David Sherman from eSpec Books. So check that out. You can find a link on my website at DeCandido.net. And please, please, please stay safe. Thank you.